Okay, everybody, welcome. And sorry, we've launched this. We just didn't have the broadcast button going, so I apologize for all of you who are waiting. Um, but welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about some very interesting things. We're going to be talking about some myths and truths about nutrition. We're going to go through a 24-hour fasting for stem cell populations, the link between toxins and insulin resistance. And then we'll talk a little bit about timed eating and liver health. So I'm here in Oahu and got my partner Cade with me. And we're going to be sharing some very interesting things today about how you can optimize your liver and how you can optimize your overall health. So really appreciate you guys being on this. I'll even go through and talk about some of the peptides. I know a lot of you are doing the AOD 9604. You've also, several of you are on the 5-amino-1-MQ. And so we'll talk about some of these peptides that are going to be really important and beneficial for your health. So a couple of different books that I've referenced today. One is called Superhuman. It's a book by Dave Asprey. He's just been just an inspiration in the entire biohacking movement. He's the one that's got the goal to live to be 180 years old. And we also had the chance to coach his medical team. Dr. Patty de Blasio was one of his medical directors. And so, we were able to go in and we've been able to help his team at Upgrade Labs, put in some of our Go Wellness systems. So that's been really exciting. The other book that I reference is The Circadian Code by Sachin Panda. And he is the chief researcher. He comes out of Toronto, that's looked at the fact that it's not so much what you eat, but when you eat that's critical for your overall health. So grab those books. They're phenomenal authors, phenomenal things. So let's jump in and let's just talk a little bit about the circadian rhythm, because what your health is dependent on making sure everything is synchronized in your life and in your body. And so if the more you can synchronize with the environment around you, the better you're going to do. And so what the circadian rhythms do is they predicate when our hormones fluctuate, when they're the highest, when they're the lowest. And so if you look at our hormonal process in our bodies, at 6 o'clock when we wake up, and that's when you're going to have the highest rise in blood pressure. And this can be kind of, this is a time where we get up, we get things energized. Melatonin secretion stops around 7:30, because remember, melatonin and cortisol, especially if you tuned into the show last week, melatonin and cortisol have this inverse relationship with each other. So when melatonin's high, cortisol's low. Cortisol's high, melatonin's low, and cortisol is that hormone that cleans up the mess in the morning. And then, more than likely, your cortisol, we want that, 30 minutes after you wake up is when it's about the highest. And then what happens is, ideally, you'll have a bowel movement in the morning. And don't forget to start out with your mindset morning. That is the most powerful tool that you can use. Your highest testosterone secretion is going to be around 9. Your high alertness between 10 and 2. So when you have focus work to do, between 10 and 2 is the ideal time. And then your best coordination is going to be right around 2:30. Your fastest reaction time is around 3:30. And then your greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength is around 5 o'clock. So it's a good time to do some deadlifting, do some squats, your strength training. In the morning, for that first 30 minutes, if you can get out in the sun and do some exercise, like some more cardio exercise, that's going to be a good time just to get sun exposure. But your ideal time, if you're trying to like really maximize, and maybe you're training for a 10K or a half marathon or marathon, your greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength is going to be at that 5 o'clock time. And then by 6:30, that's when you have the highest rise in blood pressure. So if you have hypertension, try to get into your doctor before the evening. And then your highest body temperature is going to be 1900. So that's 7 o'clock. And then your melatonin secretion starts at 9. And then, we go to bed and we sleep. And if you use the Aura Ring, you'll notice that your body goes through these sleep rhythms. And so you'll have about 4 different sleep cycles where you go through light sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep, and then you come back up and light sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep, and you just keep coming up and going down. And that's very healthy sleep cycles, ideally when you're sleeping about 6.5 hours a night in that, kind of the REM and deep sleep, with a little bit of light in there, that's an ideal pattern to go through. And so most of us, it takes about 7.5 hours in bed to really maximize and optimize that. And then we start the day over again. So that's our circadian rhythm. And in Chinese medicine, they've actually had this thing called the Harari cycle for thousands of years, where they've looked and they've said, yeah, there's different times when our energy is maximized in different systems in the body. So what is your circadian rhythm, and how does it feel? I mean, what do you like going to bed early? Do you like waking up early? Are you kind of a night owl? So what would you say your ideal circadian rhythm is? And, feel free to chat things up if anyone would like to comment on that. But what have you noticed about that? Because I find that if I go to bed early, wake up early, that's pretty optimal for me. I have friends that they're night owls. They stay out super late. They can go on little amounts of sleep, but I'm kind of like a bit of a princess when it comes to that. I like to keep things regulated. But all right, so let's talk about some of the research that exists. So the Weizmann Institute, they did a study where they hooked people up to a continuous glucose monitor so they could check their blood sugar all the time. And then they also were looking at their microbiome, and they wanted to see, if there's a correlation between, what you eat and glycemic index and the bacteria in your gut. And then with that research and with Satya Panda, what they found is that there's peripheral clocks in your organs and tissues. And they also realized that your microbiota changes at different times of the day. And so there's certain bacteria that are more active in the morning than there are that are active at night. And so with our 24-hour society, a lot of times the clocks that are hardwired into our bodies to keep us in sync with the environment and with the sun, those clocks get out of rhythm. And when those clocks get out of rhythm, that can really start damaging hormones. It affects metabolism, digestion, and even immunity. And so what they learned is that the microbes living in the gut have a profound influence on the intestinal body clock. And so if you want to maintain health, we all know how important the bacteria is in our gut, but one of the key components of it is making sure you're eating at the right time. And so what Satya Panda did is he constricted the amount of eating, what he called timed eating or time restricted eating, to a 12-hour window or less. So you have 12 hours of the day where you're not eating, at least 12 hours. That's ideal for the bacteria in your gut. And so there's a study published in the scientific journal Cell. And what researchers did is they analyzed the fluctuations of the adherence, quantity, and metabolic activity of gut microbes in the intestines of mice every 6 hours for a total of 48 hours. And what they found was that gut microbes have daily routines in which they travel to different locations throughout the intestine. Now, this is kind of interesting because just yesterday I was doing a training on stem cell therapy and translocation of bacteria in osteoarthritis. So I talked about the secretomes in stem cells. They're called AMPs, like LL37. You've probably heard me talk about LL37, but these secretomes actually help break up the infections that exist we've known for rheumatoid arthritis that infections exist in the joint, but also in osteoarthritis. And so if you have osteoarthritis in your joints, and we probably, many of you have been treated with our stem cell therapy or ozone, it's one of the critical things for your long-term health is to get rid of any infections in there. And so following this pattern of the circadian rhythm of restricting the times that you're eating to 12 hours a day, so you have 12 hours of fasting, that's going to be a key component because the microbes, they do have daily routines and they'll travel through the intestine. But what the researchers found is that these microbes can actually migrate out of the intestines if you end up with leaky gut or chronic inflammation. It can become systemic inflammation. So what they found is the metabolites produced as a result of the gut microbe circadian rhythms influence genes associated with the intestinal, pancreatic, and liver body clock. So this is one of the ways that the bacteria influence your hormones, is because they influence the genes associated with your pancreas and liver, and your liver metabolizes the majority of the hormones in your body, actually all the hormones in your body. All right, so what researchers found is that time restricted feeding can normalize these gut circadian rhythms and prevent disease. So what the time restricted feeding is it's a dietary practice in which eating is only allowed during a certain window of time each day, such as an 8-hour period from 8 to 3. That would be one example of it. Um, the research, what they found is Sachin Panda, he took mice and restricted their diet, which we'll cover in just a minute. But what this process does is it optimizes metabolism. It can balance the circadian rhythm in the microbes, and it helps with insulin resistance. So I learned about this because about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, I started noticing my blood sugar wasn't balanced, and I tested it and I was like, whoa, I wasn't pre-diabetic, but I was knocking on the door. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And so I took the Viome test and learned that I had a depletion in Akkermansia. And as I started learning more about Akkermansia, I said, holy smokes, the best way to build up Akkermansia is by simply just fasting. And so I started fasting more, and that made a huge difference. And I noticed my blood sugar, it calmed down. I was able to get trimmed up by about 10 pounds. That was phenomenal. And it felt better ever since then. And so I've adhered to a very strict, at least 12 hours. Most days I go about 8 to 10 hours, depending on the day. And then I have about one day a week, usually on a Saturday or Sunday, where I'll restrict my eating to 1 meal a day, and that actually feels really good. So something I definitely recommend that you try. But because what the researchers found, they said, look, the erratic eating patterns, such as eating nonstop all day or eating late at night, it disrupts the circadian rhythms. It's kind of like if you have a highway and you're trying to repair roads, but you don't shut down the roads, how do you expect to ever allow the crew to get in there and repair the highways? Because when we eat, it puts energy on our digestive system. We think food gives us energy, which it does, but it's kind of like running your car all night long and all day long. That's going to wear out the engine. And so then we end up with all these diseases like Crohn's and colitis, and we end up with food sensitivities. And the major reason why we do, I believe now, the major reason is because we're not giving our digestive systems a break. And so we've hyper-focused on just what you eat is being the most critical things. And everyone will say, well, yeah, if you eat healthy, you can eat as much as you want and whenever you want. And that's sort of the promise that a lot of the nutritionists and doctors have given us in the books they've written. And by the way, there's still about 12 to 1,500 books on diet and nutrition that get released every single year. So, but this is one of the fundamentals. If you can just follow the circadian rhythms. I mean, I've had patients who we've been able to get them set up on an eating plan that follows this nice 8-hour window. And this eating plan is something that is very simple, because they'll lose weight, they'll feel better, they'll have more energy, and it will balance their hormones. So it's a starting place for health, and so kind of critical. So here's the work, here's the discovery. So Dr. Panda, what he did with his research team is he said, well, let's just kind of test this theory. What if we just gave one group of mice 24-hour access to food, and then we gave the other mice the same food, but we restricted it to 8 hours, and what would happen? And so what they found is that with the 24-hour access, these mice, these lean mice who started eating at 24 hours, even though they had, same food as their counterparts who had the same genetic lineage, they found that these mice actually put on 38% more body fat in a 4-month period than the mice who had the 8-hour access to food. And then what he went on to discover further is he said that over the weekends, he would leave the mice, he would say his researchers, he didn't want to pay his assistants, is what he admitted. He didn't want to pay his assistants to come in on weekends, and they didn't want to come in on weekends either and feed the mice. And so he said, let's just leave the food out 24 hours over the weekend. And he found that even if they had 2 days where they didn't follow the time restricted eating, the mice still maintained the same outcomes. So even if you have a couple days the week where you don't follow it as closely, you still do great. And so there's some definite things that happen. So restricted feeding, it helps with DNA repair. So if you want your cells to really robustly turn over, that's going to be critical. The other thing it does is it allows the body's immune response to rebuild and repair bodily tissues. And so what will be your pattern? I mean, are you someone who, if you say 12 hours is the most you can go, that's totally fine. Maybe you try 13 hours or 14 or even 15 hours. And so, just kind of plan out your eating so that you can be very strategic about when you eat. And I can tell you, if you start with when you eat versus what you're eating, it will make things a lot easier. So we have this plan here, the nutrition plan, and we go through, and as we coach our patients on foods, the very first thing we coach you on is when to eat. And we'll look at the past, when you ate in the past, what were some of the best foods you're eating, what were some of the worst foods, and what were your energy results like. And then we talk about the present and, kind of what you're doing currently. And then we look at the future. And this is a very easy way to map it out. So the myth out there in the nutritional world, it's got to be this crazy thing where you're counting all your carbs, you're counting your fats, you're counting your proteins. But actually what we found is it's much more simplistic than that. You can actually just start with when to eat, and then just have a few best foods that you can eat throughout the day. And then, be aware of your worst foods. I discovered that when I write, I love chips, so I'll just be crunching on things, and it just, something I became aware of just by using this tool. And so this is something that, Cade can, we can post that if Cade's able to, or what you could do is we've got one of our health coaches, Erin, she's on the show, and you can just email Erin, that's ERIN at acueastwest.com, and Erin can get you some of our coaching tools, or you're welcome to set up a consultation with her or with myself, and we'll figure out what we need to do to get your nutrition on point. So here's an interesting study on fasting. So I grew up and we fast once a month. We'd fast 24 hours, and so the way you'd feel at the end was tired, kind of exhausted, but when you'd eat, it would just almost like euphoria. And after a fast, I find that once I make it through about that 15-hour mark, it actually feels fine, and you just kind of go into this nice even keel feeling. And so here's some studies where this was published in 2018 out of the Cell Stem Cell journal, and what they found is that fasting, it does a few different things. And they took mice and they fasted them for 24 hours. And then they looked at the impact of the intestinal stem cells. Now, these are some of the CD34 stem cells. And a lot of you, before you've come to get treatments, you've come in and we've said, well, try to be in somewhat of a fasted state. That can be a nice way to optimize your results, or at least after the stem cells are injected or infused into your body, then that would be another good time to follow either time restriction or fasting. But what they found is that fasting augments intestinal stem cell function in both young and aged mice by boosting fat metabolism. Using fats for energy, it preserves the health and function of intestinal stem cells, and the ability to break down and use fats for energy is impaired in older individuals unless they fast. So the older we get, the more critical that fasting becomes. And it's been a part of every major religious tradition. I think if there's one thing that all the world's religions could agree on, it would be fasting. And so this is an interesting study because the researchers, what they looked at is they said, well, what the body does when you go into a 24-hour fast is it has to shift gears. So we have two sources of energy. We have energy from fat, or we have energy from carbohydrates. And so the energy from the carbohydrates is what our body goes to first. It's the easiest to break down. Carbohydrates, as you know, they start breaking down in our mouth. The amylase starts breaking down fats, and you instantly start utilizing those simple sugars. But over time, our body is such an efficient machine. But over time, if you're in a fasted state, you consume all the carbohydrates. It takes about 12 hours to get rid of all the glycogen storage in your liver. That's why we say give yourself at least a 12-hour window where you're not eating anything, so you can use every last ounce of carbohydrate and, you know, as much sugar as you can possibly use in your body, because then your body becomes more efficient in metabolism. And that's also why we say to exercise in a fasted state, because then your body will start using energy sources from fat, and you'll feel much better. So the researchers, and this actually came out of the MIT, and Dr. Yalmaz, who was the research director, he said that during fasting, the intestinal stem cells in both young and old animals switch from utilizing carbohydrates to using fat as a primary energy source, and that this metabolic switch is driving an improvement in stem cell function. And I'll show you some images in a minute here, but for those of you who are listening, I'll explain them to you. But he said acute fasting regimens have pro-longevity and regenerative effects in diverse species, and they may represent a dietary approach to enhanced age stem cell activity in tissues. Stem cells may function better when burning fats for fuel, but lose the ability to metabolize fats efficiently as they age. So he says, we think that we are improving the quality of the existing stem cells rather than generating new stem cells under these conditions, which would be key, because it's, you know, instead of improving the quality, you know, I think that's amazing, improving the quality of the existing stem cells rather than creating new ones. Because our bodies kind of come hardwired for the amount of stem cells that we have. And so what we've learned from this study is the autophagy, which is when you clear out cells that are no longer useful. Autophagy can happen when you go into this fasted state. And so the other thing that happens is you turn on ketosis. So a ketogenic diet is something that is you know, very popularized right now. It's one of the largest search terms on Google is ketosis and ketogenic diet. And so one of the easiest ways to get your body into ketosis is just to fast. And it's a great way to improve stem cell release rates. And it's also a phenomenal way to turn on your brain performance. And so here's the image. And so what they looked at is they're looking at the stem cell populations there. And, you know, you can look at this image in this film if you're on our webinar. If you're, you know, in your car driving or just listening, then what it looks like is you can see these cells that are smaller and somewhat misshapen. And then they looked after 24 hours at these same intestinal stem cells. And these are the stem cells that migrate to create new healthy, like white blood cells and immune cells. And you can see that these cells are nice and robust. They've grown at least twice the size. And so, and you can also see there's more secretomes being released from these cells. So really powerful research that came out of the MIT. So the biggest way as you're looking to influence your metabolism, influence fasting, is one of the biggest benefits is on your liver. And there's another thing that I like to do when I'm going into fasting or on a day-to-day process. And I wrote about it in my book, Your Health Transformation, which was published about 4 years ago. But one of the things I like is using apple cider vinegar. And apple cider vinegar, not only is it a great way to get rid of glyphosate, and so we'll be diving deep into glyphosate on another episode in just a week or two. But the other thing that apple cider vinegar does is it has numerous benefits for blood sugar and insulin level. So it improves insulin sensitivity during a high carb meal by 19 to 34%, and significantly lowers blood sugar and immune responses. So if you happen to, you know, be at a party or you just, you go for it on the dessert and you're like, that was way too sweet, I feel like crap. One of the things you can do is just put a teaspoon or two of apple cider vinegar in water and drink that during your meal or before your meal. Apple cider vinegar, it can reduce blood sugar by 34% after eating 50 grams of white bread. I don't recommend anyone eat white bread, but I'm just showing you that apple cider vinegar is pretty powerful stuff. 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before bedtime can reduce fasting blood sugar in the morning by 4%. So that is important for all of you who are looking to stabilize blood sugar. That means you will stabilize all the inflammatory markers in your body. Numerous other studies in humans show that vinegar can improve insulin function and lower blood sugar levels after meals. And this can be useful for people if you have diabetes, prediabetes, or if you just want to optimize the way you feel, use some apple cider vinegar. The other thing that is critical is one of my favorite Chinese herbs. It's called huanglian, also known as berberine. And berberine is the main active ingredient in golden seal, and it's got antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and immune-enhancing properties. Berberine is also very effective in mitochondrial function. It has possible anti-cancer effects. It lowers blood sugar and reduces insulin resistance. And it stops the liver from gluconeogenesis. And so this is critical because gluconeogenesis is when your cortisol levels are out of balance. Once again, remember cortisol, melatonin. The gluconeogenesis is when your liver will start taking proteins from like your butt or your legs, and it will start turning those into sugars because your cortisol is just telling your body, we need fast energy now because we're in a stress response, a fight or flight response. And so what berberine will do, and if you're stressed, if you have a lot of stress, then take extra berberine. So I'll talk about this formula that I worked with Designs for Health and creating called Energy Multiplier. And I take that every morning and every night because the chief ingredient is berberine in it. But it may reduce cholesterol, it improves gut health, it has potential depression benefits, good for weight loss, good for dementia, lowers blood pressure, improves heart health, decreases inflammation and oxidative stress, and it eradicates infections. I mean, we've used this for thousands of years in Chinese medicine for any type of what we call lower jiao or infections that occur like in the bladder and the kidneys. And so these is very effective. So the formula Energy Multiplier, you can easily pick this up at the clinic. And berberine, once again, this is the #1 chief ingredient. Cinnamon is the second thing. So this is now we call it smart medicine. It was called Einstein's medicine, but now we've changed the name to smart medicine.
Yeah, you can pick this up at thesmartmedicine.com.
Oh, thanks, Cade. Thesmartmedicine.com is a great way where you can get this. It's got the insulin in there is part of the glucose tolerance factor. Insulin is very well known for moderating blood glucose levels. It's got banaba. Banaba helps balance out the cortisol and the gluconeogenesis. It's got American ginseng, fenugreek, kudzu, and gymnema. Gymnema will help cut down your sugar cravings, and many of you have tried gymnema for your sugar cravings, and it works like magic. I mean, we can get we have these droppers with gymnema in it, and you can have like cane sugar or chocolate chips, and you can try them first, and you can taste the sweetness, and then you put a couple drops of gymnema on your tongue, and then you taste the chocolate chips or cane sugar, and you don't taste any sweet. So gymnema is just powerful. It's an Indian Ayurvedic medicine. So this is a powerful formula. I called it Energy Multiplier because if you really want to expand your energy, this timed eating is going to be one of the key things, and then making sure you balance your blood sugar. And one of the risks and the threats that all of us have, and especially if you live in Utah, and I know a lot of you on the show right now, you live in Utah, and one of the big critical things you want to look at is the quality of our air. And I can't do much about it. I mean, I have an electric car. I'm trying to help there, but then, I need better solar panels, so it's not just a coal burning car, but there's a lot of things that we just can't do. I mean, just the geography of the mountain ranges, we get these inversions that can give us some of the worst air quality in the country. And so here's a study that revealed, this came out of the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York, but they revealed that 3.2 million new a study revealed that 3.2 new diabetes that occurred worldwide in 2016 were caused by air pollution. The same year, air pollution caused 14% of total diabetes that occurred, and 150,000 new cases in the US annually. In the case of diabetes, this harmful particles enter the blood and obstruct the insulin from converting blood glucose into energy for the well-being of the body. That's from Dr. Philip Landgren. He's at the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. So this is a critical thing, because the air pollution is rampant, and actually one of the worst places where we get the most pollution is in our houses. And so one of the things that we recommend is, from a peptide perspective, there's a peptide called thymosin alpha 1, and it's either, you can do it thymosin alpha 1 or thymosin beta 4. These are some very powerful peptides that can help modulate your immune system, because we want you to be strong, especially in the winter when we can get inversions that can set in for 10 days at a time, and it can be very toxic. I mean, you can smell it. It smells sulfury. It smells almost like sewer in the city. And so thymosin alpha 1, if you find that your immune system is compromised, instead of going and getting the flu shot or some kind of vaccine that's got all kinds of chemicals and preservatives in it that can harm your immune system long run, we'll come in and we can do thymosin alpha 1. We can get you set up where you do it at home, or you can come into the clinic and we can do a thymosin alpha 1 injection for you. There's also herbs, the astragalus and cordyceps. My favorite is called cordyceps 3. It's a great way to balance your immune system. These are the 3 treasures in Chinese medicine. And then you want to just look at your house. I mean, we don't realize all the allergens in our house that exist. I mean, we have dust, we have pet allergens. This is one of the reasons why, taking off your shoes before you walk into your house might be a really good thing you could do if you have a compromised immune system. Because once again, we're talking about liver health, blood sugar, and nutrition. And you guys are like, why are we talking about toxins, Regan? Well, because what the research found is that these toxins actually disrupted the glucose from being uptaken in the cell. And so that glucose went back into the bloodstream, and that's where it wreaks havoc. So look at the formaldehyde that could be in your flooring, your furniture, adhesives, paint, VOC. If you're painting your house, there's great paint that's no VOC. I remember 15 years ago, it was so hard. We had the Green Building Center, and so I could get these healthy paints, but they're still very hard. They were very hard to get, but now they're everywhere. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's. I mean, there's a lot of these paints you can use. But your furniture, your varnish, so if you've noticed that your blood sugar doesn't feel quite as good, you just feel a little brain foggy after you bring in that new piece of furniture, well, it could be some of the aerosols or the varnish on that furniture. Make sure you're looking for radon. If if you're getting headaches, look at your house. This is, indoor air pollution is the #1 cause of pollution. I know we talk about the external. I think it's our bodies get maximized because of our house. Make sure you get clean air fluctuating through your house. Have air purifiers. We have several air purifiers in our house. You've seen them in the clinics. And so it's very critical. Make sure lead paint, lead pipes, lead dust, you got to get rid of that. Any mold, obviously we could spend an entire hour talking about mold. These are things you want to look at. And then look at the asbestos. Don't mess with the asbestos if it's there, but those popcorn ceilings are pretty critical contaminants. But this is what happens with our cells, is because the cells can't take in the glucose effectively if you have these chemicals. So you can have the BPA. The BPA, these come from plastic children's toys, plastic bottles. So that's where, bring your own bottle, bring your not only are the plastics, like we've got massive landmass. I mean, it's like the size of Texas floating in the ocean of these plastics. but now we're getting microplastics in our salt, we're getting microplastics in the air, and this is not good for the environment. It's also not good for us. We're breathing this stuff in now. So make it a choice. I mean, one of our acupuncturists and functional medicine providers, Spencer Ames, he made a vow never to use plastic. And so it was really cool to see what he could do. And he never used plastic. So phenomenal. Pharmaceuticals, medical devices, these have some of the phthalates in them. So got to be careful with some of the medications you're taking. Watch out for furniture, clothing. There's pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. There's phytochemicals and food coloring. And then look at your personal products, house care supplies. We put some of the lotions, the stuff we put on our hair. These are all things that can cause insulin resistance. And for those of you who don't know what it feels like to have insulin resistance, it can really start disrupting the way you feel. So as you guys can see, I have a couple memes here. And one of the memes is like, hey girl, you're so sweet, I'm developing insulin resistance. Or brace yourself, and it's got a image of a warrior. I don't even know who the actor is. The insulin resistance is coming. Kate, you may know who these guys are. You guys all probably know, but I'm anyway. So there's some interesting things that you can look at. So look at the sources around your house. Look at some of those plastics, the food wraps, the detergents, industrial auto exhaust, dental restorations, cosmetics and grooming products, some of the dioxins. One of the things the dioxins do, and these come from pesticides, it can be from still byproducts, incinerations of plastics. These can actually start accumulating in your fat tissue and even in animals or in humans. And so this is where, making sure you've got the non-industrial raised animals. If you're eating any meat at all, I recommend you go vegetarian or vegan. If you're eating industrialized meat, it's very toxic for your body. So you want to make sure grass-fed, grass-finished, wild-caught, things like that, because these dioxins will get in the fat of those animals. And then it will decrease your T4 and T3 and your testosterone. So it's going to impact your thyroid function and your testosterone. And they can become estrogenic and anti-estrogenic. So you can end up building up saddlebags from that fat. PCBs, these also accumulate in human fat. They're found in rivers, lakes. They can be in the fish that we eat. And so these come from the coolants, the lubricants. They come from paints, plastic, dyes, rubber. So there's all these things that can happen. But dioxin, what they found in babies is it can impact, low birth weight, delayed neurological development or brain development, low IQ, weakened immune system. And so these are things we want to get rid of. And the BPA has been, actually there's been some very good movements over the last 10 years with BPA, because BPA, these are found in the plastics that we talked about earlier, but they can cause breast cancer, and they can decrease sperm count and increase prostate size. And men with prostate cancer, this is pretty common. And I see a lot of you, you're putting your plastic bottle in your dishwasher, washing that and using it over and over again. And this is where you're just consuming small amounts of these nanoparticles of plastic every day. So, something we got to be careful of. And so one of the things that we can do, if we look at autophagy and how we can really get our body back on track, no matter how many toxic chemicals we've been exposed to, this is where, the more you can get your body in a ketogenic state, the more you're fasting, the better chance of survival that you have to keep your liver functioning healthy, because that liver function is one of the most critical things that you can have, as far as, keeping things healthy, keeping it fit. And one of the ways you can keep your liver going is exercise. And so exercise, especially if you're in a fasted state, this will help you convert the glycogen stored up in your liver and stored in your muscles. You'll burn it as energy, and you'll just feel a lot better. So kind of the takeaways from today, hopefully you guys, learned a few things, and you're created some awareness around your overall health. But really it's not so much what you eat as when you eat. And we're going to dive into the when you eat facet, because yes, that's important, but it's also, protect your liver, because the environmental toxins, the household toxins, these are all things that we need to be aware of and try to mitigate. And get yourself on some thymosin alpha 1, especially this winter. That's a peptide that's amazing. And then pick up some energy multiplier, get your stem cell IVs to repopulate those young stem cells, and you're going to feel and look amazing. So thanks everyone for being on the show. We will be back next week at the same time. And this is Regan Archibald signing out. Thank you very much.